the speakers must begin by dissolving the questions. So how do we do that?
Well, we can start at any point. We can start at any point. For instance, we can start from an idea, for instance. You have some idea, and I may have some idea, with common interest to get to the fact of it.
To the fact?
Yes.
What's the goal? What goal do we set, you and I, sitting here now?
Yes. Well, the goal is that we first have ideas about something, about nationalism, about religion, progress, or whatever it is.
Or about self.
Or about self. And then somewhere we have to become very precise and exact. What do we really mean by that? So when we get down to what we really mean by that, then we start eliminating. And can we help each other to eliminate rather than to put each other on the spot?
So you seem to be suggesting that this process of dissolving the questions is one of harmonizing the souls or the bodies.
Yes. Or coming to one mind. Coming
the goal
to
of oneness.
Yes. And also in this oneness, that oneness is neither yours nor mine. It just is, because if it's all thought, then actually we are in a different state. It actually is a state of being. And the words do not, and it's very energetic. And you need energy to dissolve ideas or thought.
There is a great concern here now amongst all of us, it seems to me,
Yes.
for realizing the self, of what the self is to be.
Yes.
Who am I? What am I?
Yes.
And I don't suppose that ever in human history there's been so much of a mystery about who one is.
Right.
Now that's a question.
Yes.
How do we set about to
Well,
resolve that?
supposing I was to say, for instance, that self is the extension of life or of God, or that in which there is no contradiction.
I don't think I fully understand.
Well, then that's another question. You're asking, question. I would say that there is the personality self, so to speak.
The ego.
Yes, the personality self. I'm born in India, conditioned by the environment, and so therefore I become very nationalistic and feel Sanskrit is the only language to know God. All these sort of things. And you have a different background, and you have different ideas, different conditioning, so to speak. And then we can't seem to get along. You're asserting yourself, and I'm asserting myself. And this could then go on to collective consciousness, Indian collective consciousness, American collective consciousness. And both of them are promoting their own point of view, isn't it? And therefore, wherever there's a point of view, there is vested interest. Where there is vested interest, there is lack of freedom. You see? So then, is there a self that is independent of vested interest, independent of belonging to something?
You mean a truly free,
truly
free being?
Yes, a being who's liberated, say, from conditioning. And therefore, he can be with the newness. So instead of going back to the computer brain, so to speak, and then extending that, can I come to this moment to a state of innocence, so to speak, knowing that the computer is Indian?
And all the conditioning, all the things. Yes. You have to peel those, outgrow that conditioning. Is that
but it's an intensity of awareness that I can shut off the computer with the intensity of awareness. And I think it's very wise not to give it too much spiritual phraseology. I think it's best to keep it extremely simple, because it is simple. It's not the monopoly of the religious people. Any person who's sane and rational, has integrity, who's going to look into deception, self-deception, I would say is a person who's real, that he is religious. For me to be a Hindu or a Sikh or a Muslim or a Christian, well, we're back again.
In other words, you subscribe to a system,
right.
which is the Catholic or the Protestant or the Hindu or the Buddhist or whatever.
Exactly. And maybe it's because we grew up in the system.
Mm-hmm.
But someday I have to outgrow the system.
Is that what your life has been?
Yes.
Process of outgrowing?
Yes, yes. It's been very natural, and I wasn't even aware, so I can't say that at the beginning I was aware that is what I was doing. Things just, I get very intensely interested in things, and out of that interest, you know what it is to be really interested? You get so interested that it really takes over. Why? Because it begins to unfold.
Mm-hmm.
Its own energy, the energy of the fact, the energy of truth, the energy of the living moment makes one really creative.
Yes.
And then, as you become creative, it's going to be new, isn't it?
That's what creation is.
Yes. It is the new of the moment. I call that religious. I call that liberated from Indianism and Americanism. And there then, in that newness, you and I can meet, you know, without our background, so to speak.
And again, through this process of
Eliminating,
and cutting away,
right.
eliminating, as you
Right.
said.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Are we doing it now?
Yes, we are. We are. And then in reality, when we get to it little more so, I think we are on the right track.
Uh-huh.
We are on the right track. When it really gets down, then something else takes place, which is not verbal, but it's I like to call it that it's a state of being in which I don't consider you as a separate person. So I don't need to have a vested interest. I'm no longer defending myself. I'm not trying to win anything. There comes as if we were part of one life.
Now, what you're speaking of then is a freedom from any kind of fear.
Yes.
You would not
Yeah.
fear the consequences
Yeah.
of being truly open.
Right. Fear is very basic, sir. Fear is at the bottom of it all. Somewhere, fear, you see, the minute we identify with ourselves, it takes the form of unfulfillment, it can take the form of insecurity, it can take the form of ambition, it becomes competitive. But the real life, that's the life of man as a whole, and has been throughout the centuries. The very few people who have really questioned, and therefore eliminated these assumptions. I would say, in the end, fear is also an assumption.
The assumption that the universe is not friendly,
Right.
that it's a fearful place.
Yes. Yes. But whatever it is, sir, it's I am the one who's afraid. Maybe the universal is a frightful place.
Mm-hmm.
But I can deal with the fear that's within me. Because the minute I start projecting the universe or blaming the universe, I'm not looking at my fear. I'm now giving energy to planning how to cope with it and how to defend myself in it. All right. That's we go astray in that once we've accepted the premise of fear as real, then my whole system is working toward defense and survival.
But we do live in a world,
Of course.
of violence.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world in which there are fearful forces.
Yes, yes.
And it would seem that fear is justified.
Yes, it seems that way. I think it seems that way until one has gone much deeper. And that it would seem that way as long as I can justify it too.
Explain.
Huh?
I don't understand.
Like, I see that the world is cruel and there is violence,
Mhm.
and you need to do this and this and so forth.
You're a realist. You see what I see.
Of course. But somewhere I have to deal, is my seeing dependable?
Mhm.
is what I'm seeing dependable. For instance, I may see that my sensory or my bodily organs, they see this and they see that, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And according to that, it is true. Yes. But to go beyond illusion.
It's not believing. You have to.
Yes, but also not to get too intellectual. Mm-hmm. Because if you start splitting here, then more and more we become more verbal, mm-hmm. more complex. I think that it needs a lot of relaxation. It needs relaxation because it's like somebody has asked Mozart what music he likes the best. He said the gaps of silence between the notes. Oh. And thought too, with relaxation, the gaps of silence begin to widen. And when mankind gets so active, so busy, it's very difficult for those gaps of silence. We want more activity. And our diets change. We want coffees and cigarettes or drink. And I'm not judgmental about it. We just hope that when we get so stimulated, it changes everything. And it's not the contact with nature, not the contact with the dawn, or the twilight, and we get more and more isolated.
How does the energy you spoke of earlier, that seems to be essential to life action, to force and so forth, fit with this concept, as I see it, of relaxation and silence? Should seem to be.
Yeah. Well, I think that one has to see, if I'm very ambitious, mm-hmm. then I'm going to be ruthless also. Mm-hmm. Ambition exists at the society level. And I want to get rich, and it doesn't matter how I get money out of your pocket into my account.
Have you had that experience in your own life?
Oh, yes, yes. Nothing will stop me.
Being ambitious?
Oh, yes. And always for the good of another, for mankind. Because it's quite a thrill. Mm-hmm. And you become, known. Mm-hmm. You have a certain status. And you get to be on a point of advantage where you can really exploit. Every nation is doing that. Mm-hmm. One country comes and has colonies, and they don't want the status quo to change because they work things to their favor. And then somebody else is coming up. Mm-hmm. And then there's a war. And what they really want to do is to change, that they can be at the level of where they can work the things to their own advantage. Mm-hmm. So similarly, the individual that's ambitious also wants that kind of status. So one goes through with it. That's the thing that's raved about. Parents are happy, relatives, friends. Mm-hmm. If you go to college, oh, he's done very well. Somewhere disillusion has to come.
Mm-hmm. Suggesting that urge to power, that ambition, was itself an illusion.
Right, right. Somewhere you see, if you're lucky, if you probably met someone, read something, or something happened to you, or it's a kind of an awakening. Mm-hmm. This rat race, what am I caught in? But it's not easy to step out of it, because you've started so much. Yeah. And if you're lucky, then somehow you can step out of it and start finding what's your own inner calling. What would I really enjoy doing? Mm-hmm. How few people are free in that sense that they're doing what their inner calling is.
But why would a person want to renounce power, the rewards of ambition?
I would say that the one who wants to renounce it without having found their own inner calling could get into the same trap. Mm-hmm. I think outgrowing is a better word. That's because renouncing could become quite a show. I've seen thousands of people, especially in India, who go for renunciation. But the old brain patterns are the same. Preferences, choices, these things take over. So it's best to to understand things, know thyself, in a simple way. And then also finding what is it I really want to do. Because I think each person has certain abilities, probably, I don't know what, we can go into that, whether it's necessary or not. It's as if each person is born with certain abilities that they bring. One person can draw, the other one's music is natural, or someone gets natural. You know, they love nature, and they love to look at barks, and you know, so they make their contribution in the field. And in other ways, it's when man has found his own inner calling, he can't be ambitious. Strange as it, because he finds the joy in that.
I mean, in the doing, in the thing itself.
Yes, because you have to be productive. You see, when we talk about renunciation, as a rule, we don't consider that is it a state which is most productive in the real sense.
You said to me once that most of us are busy, extremely busy, without being productive, and that struck home. And I think it's true.
Yes. But the main thing is, Keith, that as surprising as it is, because being productive, if you're interested in being productive, then you'll have to also come to some kind of an honesty about this inner calling again. That I want to do this because it's intrinsic. Therefore, I'm not doing this for the sake of something else. How few people can afford that? I mean, in the present society with its pressures. And yet, any person who can be that honest with himself can afford it, because honesty is above external pressures.
But very difficult to come to, I think.
We think it's difficult. We really do think. I thought it was very difficult, but then somehow when I can't compromise, and I said, this I would do. And that means an action without fear of consequence.
Then anything else becomes difficult, I suppose.
Yes, but if you acted somehow without the fear of consequences, you've done something you never did before that way. If the need. Before you've been busy, productive, all kind of things, but they were always fear of consequences. Sure. Now you have real integrity, the purity of integrity. You say, no, this is what I want to do. Wherever it leads me, it doesn't matter. But you also have the character that you won't get dependent, you won't ask for money here and there. You know, you just have certain standard in yourself. And it's that what brings one to that productivity, to that fearlessness. And then whatever he does seems to be the need of the world itself. Like Mother Teresa we were talking about. Then whatever she would come upon would be so original, so necessary. And yet we were all busy and we never saw it.
The thing that struck me, because you gave to me the gift of a book about Mother Teresa, and the thing that struck me there was that she perceived that among the poor in Bengali she was dealing with, the problem was not poverty, it was that they were unwanted.
Right. But
it's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary because she knows what love is. And for others, it's just words. Love has a divine origin. Love is not for one person after another. That could be attachment, and we may enjoy each other. Love is independent. It has divine origin, therefore it loves life. So when she saw that, it's the love in her, and she saw somehow the separation ended.
She is the exemplar of this ideal that we hear a great deal about, unconditional love.
Absolutely. But she's the only one that I know. I mean, unconditional love, they have workshops all over America now, and they look at each other's eye, I love you, and so forth. And it's a lot of sentiment. In her case, it's alive, and therefore it's a force.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is a close colleague and follower of yours, has said that you embody the ideal of unconditional love.
It's difficult to talk about. I don't think that one could ever get Mother Teresa to say that she is it. You see, because the minute you identify it with I am it, it's not it. If someone has observed it very well, and I rather not know it as that way, because it's something given rather than achieved. It's like action of grace. It's a blessing. And it's not religious kind of phraseology, bless everybody. It's something so exuberant, so alive, that everything else seems routine.
But you do embody the goal of silence.
Yes.
You gave yourself to silence.
Yes.
Literal,
Right.
pure
Yes.
silence.
Yes.
For what, a period of 3 years?
Yes. But you see, at first, Keith, I tried it at different times. You see, too, I spent some years on the Himalayas and get up early in the morning and meditate and force myself, really force myself. I had calluses on my bottom. I sat so long for years that I couldn't sit. There were blisters just because you sit and sit and sit. And certain things I could experience, certain kind of, they're known as siddhis, you become clairvoyant and this and that and so forth. And they're powerful things, and the world is very impressed by them. And you could become a phony saint. And then you fall into a trap, you see, of that too. And very soon people start following you, and you don't even know you. And that's very, very another trap. They're naive, you see, and you're somewhat clever about it, and so it gets. But it's like again somewhere an honesty. Am I still interested in drawing attention to myself?
I want to put you to that test.
Yes, please do.
Pause for some words, commercial words, and then come back and talk with you biographically.
Certainly.
Spiritual way, if that's not too highfalutin, very early.
Yes. Well, I wasn't really very much inclined towards religion, and...
Well, you notice I didn't say religion. I said spiritual way.
Yes. You see, I left India at the age of 9. My father was abroad, and he took some interest in India's freedom and so forth and so on. And he felt if he came back to India, he might be arrested for arousing other Indians against the empire or so. So I then came to meet him with my mother. So I was about 8-9 years of age. Then I stayed abroad in Europe and Central America and so on for 9 years. Now, when I went back to India, it's a queer mixture of East and West. And anybody 18 years of age thinks he knows everything. And going to an Indian village where, we have roots, all the other families there, and it seemed very backward to me, and I didn't like this and that, because there were very little pleasure and excitement in life, which I had gotten used to. But the family was very religious, whereas the other part of my father and so we were very patriotic. So I thought the solution was how to get the British out. So my heroes were so-called leaders of India, and not the gurus and not the prophets and not the saints. I had no interest in that whatsoever. But nevertheless, after about 2 years being there and constantly hearing this, everything is God, everything is this, very annoying. And some accident took place where I'm confronted by so-called a holy person. And he talks about God and if I was interested and so on. We talked about that last time, so I'm trying not to repeat the same thing. And I think I have never been so serious, but that moment brought me to seriousness. Yeah. You see, I couldn't just say any kind of a cliche and get away with, and it was a real confronting. And it's a state I had never known before. It's not something, and as I started to speak, it was more than the superficial things I was saying. Somehow I got into the challenge of it. And immediately, the interest grew that I must try and find God, if there is such a thing. And so the tradition is you go to the Himalayas and then you start doing what the Vedantas say or what the Sikh religion say and so forth and so on. So I followed those things. And they all recommend lots of meditation, lots of religious feeling. Don't look at girls, don't do this, don't do that. You know, these are the commandments. And I really stuck to it.
And the calluses on the bottom.
Yes. And the other thing was that what I would say was unique that I didn't know, that I never made anything into an ideal. Whatever, say, it was the ideal, I would really bring it into application, no matter what happened. Because if I had not done that, then in the end, I would have felt I was a lowly worm, I was a sinner, I'm no good. You see, you begin to condemn yourself. But since more or less what I would project and want, I would do it. It's very difficult, and then you get off that. But it never gave me the feeling that if I did 4 years later, I didn't feel that I left anything undone. So I could come to disillusion. Otherwise, it would drag on. So I came to disillusion that I was pursuing my own desires. They could be religious, they could be spiritual. God is there, heaven is there, this is no good, I've got to go there. And that this was the pursuit. I said, my goodness, all this penance for that. But in the meantime, I'd also had an ability to concentrate, an ability to really listen, an ability to think something through. This I didn't have before. Now I could really listen to someone, and ask a profound question because one has gone through with it. Or maybe 4 years of real serious study to something. Then came the disillusion, following something. The organized religion. That what it says is what it wants. It may not be so. All right. And that out of this disillusion then, either I could have become a guru, because there were hundreds of people who come and rave about your devotion. And indeed I was devoted. I really was that. But now, when the disillusion came, either I would turn into business or I would leave. But you can't leave because you've put in so much of your life into it and people are going to ridicule you. So it's better to become a guru. Even though you know nothing about God, but you know all about that particular religion. What St. John said, what Mark said, what Matthew said, what the Quran said. You could be an expert at it. You've got a PhD in it.
Almost irresistible.
Yeah.
Career open to talent.
Yeah, there you are. You have it. And you could call it your inner calling.
Yes.
Whatever you like. In my case, somehow, I couldn't reconcile with that. And then I met lots of saints, and they had seen me, and they could see my sincerity or naivety or just a passion, a burning passion. I said, you name it what I have to do, and I'll do it. I didn't feel that it could, that one need to do it half-heartedly. So I'd go for it. But they themselves were where I was before, still believing that it could take place. And they couldn't satisfy me. I said, that's how I felt yesterday. Nothing could have changed my mind because I really felt I was doing the right thing. God was there and so forth and so on. But my God was my projection. It was my God of my projection, and this is how he was, but I didn't know the fact of it. You see, I never knew. I believed in bliss, but I never knew what bliss was.
Cutting through one's own projections is the most difficult task of all.
Because whatever we project, we would believe.
Of course.
So it is such a trap. Sure. Whatever we project, we believe. And it goes on. And it came to an end. It took me 4 years. I was totally out of it. And there was no regret because one part of humanity, that follows religion and all the ritual of it, at least one has outgrown it. It was no longer mere knowledge, but direct experience of it. But I had not found, so to speak, God or whatever it is. I had moments of great beauty.
But you'd shed some skin.
I did, yes. And then I felt the next thing was to do something about India. You see, again, the patriotic side, that there was such poverty, appalling poverty, and a certain kind of injustice about people, human life being so miserable. You want to do something, political or not. It didn't. I was more humanistic by this time, and wanted to do something and from the self-centeredness of wanting to be in heaven, now it was, what about mankind? So the passion was still there. So I met Gandhi and all the great leaders, about that, and could really talk about it because the whole of the Indian background about religion and this and virtue and ethics, I mean, they were part of my life. So
you became a businessman.
Well, yes, later on. So I became a businessman because I said, look, we need to do something, even when the British are in India. There's certain things we can do. They have no objection to people cleaning up the streets and the gutters and the filth. I mean, there could be dispensaries, there could be things like that. They would rather encourage it. Why just go on harping that they need to be out? I said, I agree with it. Every country should be free. Totally. But most of the intelligent people of India, the intelligentsia and so forth, they wanted political freedom. I said, I'm totally with it. But what are we going to do when we get freedom? What qualifications would India have? He's been 5 years to jail. This one has been 17 years to jail. I mean, jailbirds. We're going to need economists, engineers, artists, and so forth. So I don't want to go to jail. And they felt that you couldn't do anything in India on a large enough scale so that it makes per capita difference. And you would need capital, you would need government permits, and so forth and so on. I thought that those things could be gotten, and they thought they couldn't. So since I came from a small community of the Sikhs, who are very enterprising people, there were about 40% in the Indian Army, and even in the Indian Olympics, there were about a large number of them were Sikh, and yet they were less than 1% of the population or so. But very vital community. So that was my religion, you see, and all these people used to adore me. My God, here's a sincere person. Now I told them that that's not it. Let's do something for the people here. And I went to Maharajas and so forth, and within a year I collected $6 million to do things. And the main thing was that I was never to touch the money. I will not charge salary. I'll do something else and make a living, but I'll give my life to that. So we succeeded. So I learned a lot about industry, a lot about the economy, a lot about getting first-rate minds to work.
But you outgrew that too.
Yes, that got outgrew because Pakistan and India came. And I lost, it all went astray. And then I wanted to leave India and travel abroad. But by this time, this is more of a different kind of background. I'm in my 26 and so on. And have a world view, so to speak. And India is free. How are we going to build this country? Is it going to be on the line of Western democracy? And what are the things we can learn and what are the things we can avoid? So I came then abroad to travel in England, America, and so on.
You seem to touch a great many of the prominent people of the world.
You have to, because they're the only one that are not opinionated. I mean, they're the one who makes decisions, and you have to talk to them. I mean, the other people, hardly, the masses know so little. They don't make the decision. They read and they have their opinions and so forth, but the opinions are shaped and formed by others. And going through religion and the other, I had gained quite a background. But underneath it all, being so successful with the industrialization, being so successful with the other, there was always that there is more to life. So this outgrowing process was not something I had intended to do, but it would turn out to be that way.
It would seem as though you have been impelled along the way.
Impelled is the right word, yes. And then the other passion came how to complete something, not leave it halfway.
Now, what we must do is pause for some words and then come back and consult that question.
Very well.
It took you into this incredible experience of silence.
Yes, yes. Well, that came, well, let's see, the first completing now that I'm abroad, and I'm mostly in America, and I see a lot of goodwill in America, tremendous lot of goodwill. Had gotten in touch with Thoreau and Emerson and Whitman and Jefferson, talking about democracy and extraordinary things, what these men were saying. Jefferson particularly saying that what is needed after the Tea Party was not violence, the need was for prayers and fasting. I was so deeply moved by that. This country has a foundation on ethics. It has some divine principles. And then Emerson talking about the country, that America was to outgrow priestcraft, you know, and all this religious thing and so forth. And where man is liberated, come to new consciousness. And he was so bold in saying things that we have become more attached to properties, that we become more defensive rather than what we should. And all of these things spoke to me a great deal, particularly coming from the other part of the world. But nevertheless, I thought maybe there were people in any country, because we're all part of humanity. And people in India, maybe the finest people in this country, and some of the fine people in India could get together and maybe bring about different kind of relationships. So that brought me in contact with all the big people, Norman Cousins and Mrs. Roosevelt's and senators and others. But in the end, the completing was that won't work either. It's too many ideas, and it's too external, so to speak.
Solving the world's problems,
yes,
on a cosmic scale.
Yes, it was too, I didn't feel it was to be. So then can one complete something and get back to oneself? You see? So, but look at the completing of the religious business, completing about the industrialization, completing about the world relationships with prime ministers and president. I mean, not even at a lower level there. You began to see that the world, the panic of superpower evolving, the wanting bases had become so important that the real goodwill, you know, maybe mankind had a chance, you see, just after the war, there was some idealism. But it was going away. The other forces, the deteriorating forces are very rapid. So then something else started to take place in me, another awakening, very independent. Now this is the interesting thing, that it's not something I did. It was just an inner awakening that began to see certain kind of conclusions in which one was caught, and the illusions of this and that and so forth, and some inner gladness, something that was independent, and here it was in me. And it's at peace. And therefore it doesn't divide this from that. I could love a person whether they were wrong or they were right. What is it, if you were to ask me that, I would say, there is a point that goes beyond right and wrong, good and bad, like and dislike, in which there is no conflict.
No conflict.
No conflict. And so therefore, you and I may disagree, but it doesn't end there. One could go beyond that. When I came to that point is what introduced me to something that's within me. And the conclusions ended, and the projections ended. And then I wanted to spend time in silence, but I had no choice in it. It was not Tara wanting to be silent. The silence was already there.
But is it an inner voice, or is it some external force that takes you along?
I think that when you have it, then it's not external. You know, when it's there, it's not external. But when I was seeking, I thought it was external. But the seeking had ended, and the learning has ended.
And in the silence, for you, is wisdom.
Yes, it's wisdom because it doesn't get involved in the mortal fuss. It doesn't get involved in anything that we may call is fear or insecurity or ambition. Nothing can touch that space.
And in the process, because I assume it is a process, a dynamic process, you are transformed.
Yes. Something happens, independent of oneself.
But, and this is the question, how does that make a difference?
It makes a difference. You no longer have motives, strangely enough. You become truly productive. And then you're productive, and you can do whatever it is that you're going to do. It would be related to something more eternal. So we have to define another term, that there is a world that's created by God. The sun, the moon, the waves, or my heartbeat. You see, something that's eternal, that time cannot touch, and is independent of circumstances. And then there is the world, man-made world. One is more with that what is God created, and that what God created, or is a state of being, affects the man-made world. Or it's an eternal state that affects all that is of time, because it's independent of circumstances.
Having come to this wisdom, you have not set about to create a vast discipleship.
Well, then there would be unfulfillment. If one did that, then there's unfulfillment.
You have created the Foundation for Life Action.
Yes. Well, I've created Foundation for Life Action, but we do work on a non-commercial basis. And nobody thought, even the people who are supposedly close to me, although nobody is close and nobody is far, because we're all human beings. And when the right and wrongs are finished, then you see there's no reactions about it. All right. So then, whatever I set out to do doesn't have commercial motives. So, because I believe that the name of God cannot be commercialized.
And you are, as we talk, in the midst of a year in which you are teaching the Course of Miracles, or at least facilitating miracles.
Yes, very much so.
You believe in miracles, daily miracles, ordinary miracles.
Well, you see, my definition of miracle is that when I step out of so-called time and hit upon that what's eternal, where the dualities end, that's a miracle. That introduces me to my own eternity. And then I see you as an eternal being. And therefore our time differences, opinions, no longer affect us. See, in that way. So we started with the Course in Miracles because it has a curriculum of its own, 365 lessons, one lesson a day. And then the other thing is about reading things. Can you read the words and go beyond what the words are describing? And so 45 people have come to take this 1-year retreat, and it's non-commercialized. So first of all, I had taken a year off to read the Course in Miracles myself. Is it true? See, also said, life becomes very precious, and I don't want to waste a day of my life, not even an hour. It's like Thoreau said, it's too precious, it's too meaningful. If one is lonely, then you need indulgences or outlets. All that finishes, so now you can do what you really want to do, calling. That's intrinsic and it's complete in itself. So then, it becomes very meaningful and very productive. When the people ask, how are you going to make a living? How are you going to pay the rent? What are you going to do? This and that. I said, that's what I would have asked a few days ago, or a few years ago. That doesn't arise, because what is productive is complete in itself. It will take care of the economic affairs too. It will also take care of who's going to come. You see. So,
and it has proved.
It has proved, exactly.
And this also for those people who are taking this course.
Absolutely, yes. So the people came to the course, and then whatever we share becomes very meaningful, because there are certain things I cannot learn. I can only learn when I teach. So I I am learning, I'm the student.
Can you give me an example?
Well, for instance, someone asks a question that I know nothing about. All right.
That happens to me all the time.
Yes, know nothing about. I can come to a space where thought doesn't intervene, and a more profound state, you see, and then really get to whether this was a relevant question or not and go deeper. And I begin to learn. So what do you learn? You learn certain eternal laws, certain principles.
Can you learn from another person? Do you learn from Krishnamurti, for example, or from Nehru? Or...
Yes. Well, one can, of course, learn from another person. But then, the minute the learning takes place, you never become dependent on the other person. So there's no guruship in it. And that's why I'm not doing anything that has a guruship in it. It's non-commercial through and through. There's no dependence. And it's an action like the ACIMs. We started on Easter, April the 3rd, the day of resurrection of Christ. And we will complete it next year in April. And then I have no idea what I would do. Neither does it concern me. See, so one action is gotten completed, and therefore there's no guru, nobody raising money to buy community or start an ashram. That only comes when there's unfulfillment.
Now, you must, in the process, have read my mind, because what I want to do is pause for some words and come back and ask you what's next.
All right. Sure.
Because you know what you're doing between now and next Easter. You're engaged in that.
I think, sir, once you have become an extension, each one of us is an extension, either of our own fear, or we are an extension of life. The sun never asks the question what he's going to do tomorrow. The sun shines. So that doesn't even occur to me. I will continue to extend.
But we don't know. We can't know where to find Tara Singh after Easter.
Well, you will. If you're really interested, there's no way of not knowing. You see, for instance, we have an address, 902 Burnside, here in Los Angeles, and we answer every single letter. We really welcome people, and I find this non-commercialized action one of the most rewarding things, because then the tapes and the books and the things that will emerge out of it are very significant.
And you seem to have a way of putting people in touch with themselves.
Yes.
And you don't so much quote other people.
No.
As invoke their spirits.
Yeah. Well, you see, the only thing a teacher can do, Keith, is introduce man to his own perfection. Otherwise, you make them dependent.
But you do invoke the great teachers. Mother Teresa, we spoke of Krishnamurti, Socrates, you often.
Oh, yes. Now, Socrates had said something I wanted to read to you. There was a man who really was pretending he knew a lot. He even declared himself as a prophet. So he was an intelligent person. And Socrates then asked the question. He said, do you really believe that you understand the ruling of divine law and what makes action pious and impious so accurately that in these circumstances that there are no misgivings? I mean, look at these people who dissolve all the notions and impulses and answers and so on. And so, but also the wise integrates everyone. To him, Buddha and Jesus are not separate. And Muhammad and Moses are not. Those who have touched upon it, they are there, but there's no need for us to follow them necessarily, but we can be inspired by them.